Hey humans, welcome to Read to Me, Matt Dunn. I'm Matt Dunn. This guy. I'm going to read Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. We are in chapter 44, the double four, which makes that an 8. Chapter 8. We're going on chapter 8, apparently. God dang these rules. I'm just kidding. I did find it actually right away, chapter 8. Things happen. Oh, no, it's chapter 13. I'm a dum-dum. Me dum-dum. Me. X is 10. Chapter 44. Elizabeth had settled it that Mr. Darcy would bring his sister to visit her the very day after her reaching Pemberley, and was consequently resolved not to be out of sight of the inn the whole of that morning. But her conclusion was false, for on the very morning after their arrival at Lambton, their visitors came. They had been talking about the place with some of their new friends, and were just returned to the inn to dress themselves for dinner with the same family, when the sound of a carriage drew them to a window, and they saw a gentleman and a lady in a curacao driving up the street. Elizabeth, immediately recognizing the livery, guessed what it meant, and imparted no small degree of surprise to her relations by acquainting them with the honor which she expected. Her aunt and uncle were all amazement, and the embarrassment of her manner as she spoke joined the circumstance himself, and many of the circumstances of the preceding day opened to them a new idea on the business. Nothing had ever suggested it before, but they now felt that there was no other way of accounting for such attentions from such a quarter than by supposing a partially for their niece. While these newly born notions were passing through their heads, the perturbations of Elizabeth's feelings was every moment increasing. She was quite amazed at her own discomposure, but amongst other causes of disquiet, she dreaded lest the partiality of the brother should have said too much in her favor, and more than commonly anxious to please, she naturally suspected that every power of pleasing would fail her. Well, what do you think, Elizabeth? Is this what you wanted? Is this what you wanted? You wanted this, didn't you? She retreated from the window, fearful of being seen, and as she walked up and down the room, endeavoring to compose herself, saw such looks of inquiring surprise in her uncle and aunt as made everything worse. Miss Darcy and her brother appeared, and this formidable introduction took place. With astonishment did Elizabeth see that her new acquaintance was at least as much embarrassed as herself. Since her being at Lambton, she had heard that Miss Darcy was exceedingly proud, but the observation of a very few minutes convinced her that she was only exceedingly shy. She found it difficult to obtain even a word from beyond a monosyllable. One syllable. Yes, okay, right, okay, thank you, thanks, hey, how you doing, thanks, hey, That's that kind of stuff, I guess. Miss Darcy was tall, and on a larger scale than Elizabeth. And though little more than 16, her figure was formed, and her appearance womanly and graceful. She was less handsome than her brother, but there was sense and good humor in her face, and her manners were perfectly unassuming and gentle. Elizabeth, who had expected to find in her as acute and embarrassed an observer as ever Mr. Darcy had been, was much relieved by discerning such different feelings. They're instant besties, I bet it. I bestie it. They had not been long together before Darcy told her that Bingley was also coming to wait on her, and she had barely time to express her satisfaction and prepare for such a visitor, when Bingley's quick step was heard on the stairs, and in a moment he entered the room. "Hey, everybody, I'm Bingley, Mr. Bingley!" Ha ha! Remember Bingley's the funny guy? All Elizabeth's anger against him had been long done away, but had she felt any? It could hardly have stood its ground against the unaffected cordiality with which he expressed himself on seeing her again. He inquired in a friendly though general way after her family, and looked and spoke with the same good-humored ease that he had ever done. Excuse me. To Mr. and Mrs. Gardiner he was scarcely a less interesting personage than to herself. They had long wished to see him. The whole party before them, indeed, excited a lively attention. The suspicions which had just arisen of Mr. Darcy and their niece directed their observation toward each with an earnest though guarded inquiry, and they soon drew from those inquiries the full conviction that one of them at least knew what it was to love. Of the lady's sensations they remained a little in doubt, but that the gentleman was overflowing with admiration was evident enough. Elizabeth, on her side, had much to do. She wanted to ascertain the feelings of each of her visitors. She wanted to compose her own and to make herself agreeable to all. And in the latter object, where she feared most to fail, she was most sure of success, for those to whom she endeavored to give pleasure were prepossessed in her favor. Bingley was ready, Georgina was eager, and Darcy determined to be pleased. Determine this, my little princess. In seeing Bingley, her thoughts naturally flew to her sister. And oh, how ardently did she long to know whether any of his were directed in a like manner, his thoughts to the sister. Sometimes she could fancy that he talked less than on former occasions, and once or twice pleased herself with the notion that, as he looked at her, he was trying to trace a resemblance. But though this might be imaginary, she could not be deceived as to his behavior to Miss Darcy. Who had been set up as a rival to Jane. No look appeared on either side that spoke particularly regard. Nothing occurred between them that could justify the hopes of his sister. On this point she was soon satisfied, and 2 or 3 little circumstances occurred ere they parted, which in her anxious interpretations denoted a recollection of Jane not untinctured by tenderness, and a wish of saying more that might lead to the mention of her had he dared. He observed to her at a moment when the others were talking together, and in a tone which had something of real regret, that it was a very long time since he had had the pleasure of seeing her. And before she could reply, he added, "It is above 8 months. We have not met since the 26th of November, when we were all dancing together at Netherfield." Elizabeth was pleased to find his memory so exact, and he afterwards took occasion to ask her when unattended by any of the rest, whether all her sisters were at Longbourn. There was not much in question nor in the preceding remark, but there was a look and a manner which gave them meaning. This guy was hoping her sister was probably there, probably. It was not often that she could turn her eyes on Mr. Darcy himself, but whenever she did catch a glimpse, she saw seashells by the seashore. She saw an expression of general compliance, and in all that he said she heard an accent so far removed from hauteur or disdain of his companions, as convinced her that the improvement of manners which she had yesterday witnessed, however temporarily its existence might prove, had at least outlived one day. When she saw him thus seeking the acquaintance and courting the good opinion of people with whom any intercourse a few months ago would have been a disgrace, when she saw him thus civil, not only to herself, but to the very relations whom he had openly disdained, and recollected their last lively scene in Hunsford Parsonage, the change was so great, and struck so forcibly on her mind, that she could hardly restrain her astonishment from being visible. It's so visible. Never, even in the company of his dear friends at Netherfield or his dignified relations at Rosings, had she seen him so desirous to please, so free from self-conscious or unbending reserve as now, when no importance could result from the success of his endeavours, and when even the acquaintance of those whom his attentions were addressed would draw down the ridicule and censure of the ladies both of Netherfield and Rosings. That stupid ass. Wait, I didn't understand that last paragraph. What do we got? Okay, we got okay. Definitely. I'm gonna reread that last paragraph for you, for myself, more like. Never, even in the company of his dear friends at Netherfield, or his dignified relations at Rosings, had she seen him so desirous to please, so free from self-conscious or unbending reserve as now, when no importance could result from the success of endeavours, and when even the acquaintance of those to whom his attentions were addressed would draw down the ridicule and censure of the ladies both of Netherfield and Rosings. That made a little bit more sense. He's doing good. He's doing good with his I wish to please you. I'm not as stuck up as you thought I was. Maybe I could use some help. I'm not that good of a social person. Just give me time. That's a nice thing to do. Give him a second chance. With that, we're going to take a pause and we're going to go to part 2. Go to part 2 right now immediately. You can click the button. Probably it's going to be in the video. Anyway, let's do this. By all means, click the like button if you like this video. Hit the subscribe button if you like this video. Write some comments down if you like this video. Tell me what you think if you like this video. And please, remain calm. I am probably not going to do this forever. And I promise I won't make videos anymore. If you just hit the subscribe button, I'll stop. I swear to God. Just kidding. I'll see you tomorrow. And remember, be weird. Just do it. Be weird.